And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and pedantic forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. I can officially announce that you now have 6 days to get all of your Christmas stuff done. I, too, am behind the 8 ball a little bit. I've got a few things to buy for the lovely Christine and a few others. But I'm apt for the task. I'm up for it. I'm ready to get going. And I know that I've got 6 days to do it. And I'm trying really hard not to procrastinate. You know, there's so much stuff going on that it's easy to do. You think, well, I can get to that later. And then you look at your watch a few hours later and you're like, oh, crap, where'd the whole day go to? But I'm trying not to do that, even though I've only got about 6 days to finish up. But anyway, welcome to the program. If you want to be part of today's show, the phone number is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. I'll open up the phone lines in a little while, maybe at the bottom of the hour. I don't know. I want to get some work done, and then maybe I'll take a few calls. But if you want to be part of the show, the phone number is 307-374-8989. Now, according to the Democrats and the New York Times, we all know that the old gray lady is the mouthpiece for everything leftist, and they have been for quite some time. But according to them and their podcast, if you want to understand conservatives, just watch Yellowstone. Now, I find this preposterous, since it was Kevin Costner who ended up being the laughingstock of most conservatives during not this past election, but the previous one, where he came out and he supported Liz Cheney. No conservative in their right mind is going to sympathize with the likes of Taylor Sheridan or Kevin Costner. And according to Town Hall, that's exactly correct, that the New York Times is completely off their rocker. And I quote, "We are currently beholding a post-election malaise felt by the Democrats and those on the left. Especially hard-hit and grappling with the after-effects have been the members of the media. They are facing a reality that they were unable to influence the election results and are now grappling with the sense that they may have lost the stranglehold on the national narrative." It was pretty clear election night where Trump was able to execute a landslide. He won the popular vote. He won the electoral vote. He won all 7 swing states. I don't really think that you could argue in any way, shape, or form that the Democrats came out of this with any sort of victory. I mean, maybe they took some solace in reducing the majority in the House, but in general, they lost it all. They lost the House, they lost the Senate, they lost the presidency, all of it. So, and the biggest participant in all of that was the media. There was a time when the media could shift the balance in an election, where most people actually trusted what figures like Walter Cronkite and Tom Brokaw and Dan Rather said. But those figures, including Walter Cronkite, if you pay attention to some of his broadcasts, but a lot of those figures, the Tom Brokaws, the Dan Rathers, those guys have been exposed for the leftists that they are. Several of them retired in shame. And so it's no wonder why the left is feeling that they have lost the narrative, that they've made a bunch of missteps, and that they were completely out of line with the American people. Now, the media this time around tried to tell you over and over that Donald Trump was a terrorist and that he was a dictator and that he was a fascist, that he was Hitler. Pretty much insert any pejorative you can think of, and that would summarize the message that the mainstream media was giving. But Americans didn't buy that. In fact, they saw it for the lie that it was. And now the media is grappling with the reality that they no longer can influence public opinion en masse, that most of them in the media are going to have to earn the trust of the public, if that is at all possible in any way, shape, or form. Now, for a prime example of this, dysphoria, just look at the reactive outrage spewed towards Elon Musk for daring to open up his societal platform to alternative voices. As the press notices people are not listening to them at appreciable levels, journalists are loudly proclaiming that they are exiting X and moving to Blue Sky. I've never even logged on to what this Blue Sky thing is. I think it's another example of the left trying to outpace talk radio. And that is a really good example, a really good idea to talk about it. I'm glad I thought of it. Talk radio has always been dominated by conservatives. Now, there have been liberal attempts over the years to try to break into the talk radio market, but all of them fail. And the reason for it is, I believe, that Democrats and the left in Wyoming, the Redcoats, are unable to articulate their narrative in a way that the public will understand and agree with. They're unable to do that because most of their ideas don't work in the real world. If you're going to spend and spend and spend with no end in sight, most people look at that and say, well, my own household doesn't work like that. So why would I believe you when you say we should continue spending on social programs that have no end in sight whatsoever? Or their ideas on defense, that the U.S. needs to be knocked down a peg or two and that we should absolutely deplete our strategic petroleum reserve. When those ideas start to be articulated in a long format discussion, their idiocy is exposed, that those ideas really don't work. The idea that there are bad actors in the world, and some of them really don't like the United States. So why would it make any sense to deplete our strategic petroleum reserve, to deplete our military stockpiles, to have military recruiting at a low level? To have people in charge of different branches of our government that are clearly outside of the mainstream of America and, in fact, are living on perhaps what is most definitely the fringes. When you're trying to push on people that the mainstream thinking represents less than 1% of the population, then we should have drag queen story hour and drag queens and people in high government offices, men that think they're women and women that think they're men. And more often, that's men that think they're women. But when those ideas, as ridiculous as they are articulated in a long format medium, by medium I mean platform, they don't make sense because they never do. The only way that those ideas make sense is in theory. And most Americans don't operate on theory. They operate on facts, like how much is my grocery bill this week and how much is it going to cost me to fill up my gas tank. Those are the things that Americans look at. So when you look at the media narrative in general, and I use talk radio as an example, I think it's a really good one because Democrats and the liberals, they can't articulate their message in any meaningful way because their ideas just don't work. So when you look at the media in general, they're realizing that Americans have caught on to the gag, that the media is no longer in charge, that they no longer have the influence that they do because they cannot be believed. How many elections in a row has the polling been entirely off? I would say at least the last 3, perhaps the last 4. The media, it has been telling Americans one thing, and when reality comes around, it is actually the complete opposite. So the media is grappling with the reality that their influence has been waning for a long time, and perhaps it's at its terminal end. In another example of how their struggle is real, there was this episode of the New York Times podcast called A Matter of Opinion. No, this is not a dry as a rice cake rehashing of the op-ed pages from the paper, but instead more of a discussion of news items and some cultural crossover elements discussed between three New York Times staffer, Michelle Cottle, Russ Dutat, and Carlos Lozada. In the latest episode, they attempted to look at what elements in our culture might be emblematic of the Trump era. Now, remember, these are leftists that are trying to determine what's happening in the MAGA movement and why Americans are shifting their support from what is normally Democrats more to what is more increasingly popular Donald Trump. Now, Dutat is one of those Times token conservatives, but he's never really stuck out as a particularly deep thinker on matters. We see this as to the first term as president, citing the film The Shape of Water. He brings up the film as an example of what he calls oppositional culture, a work created as a reaction to Trump. This is a prime example of not someone overthinking the concept, but underthinking it. Though the film was released in the fall of Trump's first year in office, it is difficult to say it is in any way reflective of Trump's rise. The Shape of Water, is directed by Guillermo del Toro, is a retelling of the creature from the Black Lagoon, told from the creature's perspective. Here's all you need to know to disqualify this choice. The director began collaborating on the story in 2011, well before Trump was even a political consideration. And del Toro was pitching it as to his lead actress 3 years before the shooting and production ever took place. And when the world was convinced Hillary Clinton was a lock for the White House, filming wrapped up about 2 days before Trump's upset victory. And then it was changed into an attack on Trump. Now, these morons at the Times then shifted, and they decided that the best way to describe conservatives, and if you want to understand conservatives, is to watch the television show Yellowstone. Personally, I'm not really a fan of it. I've watched a few episodes, but I considered it more of a cowboy soap opera, which I believe that's exactly what it was. I mean, a lot of people are fans of it. My parents are hopelessly addicted to it, and they've watched all of the spin-offs of it. But in this podcast, Michelle Cottle then throws in her choice of a Trump cultural icon and delivers Yellowstone, this hugely popular family ranching drama. It is essentially a cowboy soap, just like I said, but instead of the "don't leave me Tristan" levels of drama, we're more likely to see scenes of someone trussed up and tossed into the bed of a Dodge Ram so they can be pitched off of a cliff, commonly referred to as the train station. Quote, Cottle states, "It's looking at really basic American things like land and tradition and family and violence and bloodshed. So it's a little bit like a red state secession." But here's the problem, that the folks that came up with Yellowstone really don't understand conservatism either. The creator of the show, Taylor Sheridan, wrote the show as a statement against the very red state Trump themes that she points to. Sheridan has a history of drawing sympathetic themes with Native Americans and against the wealthy and corporate greed, all while operating in a corporate world of a big studio Hollywood. This is hardly a pro-Trump effort. Sure, many on the right are embracing the show, but possibly for unintended reasons. If anything, what is more likely at play is the Swanson paradox. This is where an attempt is made to denigrate those on the right by concocting what the leftists feel is an over-the-top caricature of conservatism, but instead they managed to create a favorable character. Now, this happened on the NBC sitcom Parks and Recreation, where the Ron Swanson character was made into a broad parody of a libertarian, but his supposedly hyperbolic actions were seen as favorable positions, making him a beloved figure for those on the right. Now, the truth is that the popularity of Yellowstone is that it is a good story and a fairly interesting show. But to try to cast the show as being emblematic of what all conservatives are, really is to try to paint a cartoonish caricature of what conservatism is. That we are these backwoods people, or that we live on a ranch, and that it's all violence and it's all land, and it's really pretty one-dimensional. The truth is far from that. And conservatives, by and large, are not one-dimensional at all. And really, when you get down to it, the country as a whole is probably more center-right than it is anything else. Americans proved that they're going to vote for the guy that best helps their pocketbook and their family, regardless of what the media says. So while the New York Times and the media in general try to paint conservatives as some of backwoods, uneducated trolls, the reality is the real trolls are those on the left, the people that try to convince you of things that just plainly aren't true. Things that they never could articulate in talk media or talk radio, and that's why they failed in all of those other formats. It's for the very same reason that CNN and PMS NBC's ratings have been in the toilet for a really long time, because most people, generally speaking, don't agree with the left. And that, my friends, is the sum of it. The New York Times and all the rest of the media, they can continue to analyze their loss if they want to try to determine, well, maybe we didn't explain our message enough. That's what you always hear Democrats say. We didn't explain our argument enough. People don't really understand it. Well, the truth is your argument is bullcrap, and people see that from the very beginning. That it doesn't matter how many times you try to paint the lipstick on a pig. Americans see that in the end, it's still a pig. We'll return from the break, and I've got a number of different stories for you. It's a big news day here on the program. Next one up, majority of Americans are optimistic about the next 4 years. How could you tell he's not a Democrat? More after the break. Are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, information, and entertainment than right here on the Independence Network. Now, we're making a few changes, moving a couple things around, out with the old and in with the new, and that whole spiel. Of course, you could listen to my program, The Ramble Room with Ken Pendergraft, Locked and Loaded with the good Representative Tony Locke from Casper. There's a whole bunch more coming on the Independence Network. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Cowboy State Politics, and I am David Iverson, your illustrious host. Documented to be almost always right. 89.9% of the time. I really need to recalculate those numbers because I am pretty sure that it's a little bit higher than that. But, it's not something that I keep up with. I am interested in bringing you the news and giving you my thoughts on conservatism and guiding the conversation, which is what I do each and every day here on the program. There's a poll out that the majority of Americans are optimistic about the Trump agenda. despite all of the tariffs. And I quote, a majority of Americans say they are optimistic about the policies President-elect Trump will pursue in his incoming administration, according to a new poll from Monmouth University. The poll found that 53% of Americans are either very or somewhat optimistic about Trump's second term. That is a slight rise from the weeks prior to his first term, when then he came in at 50% of Americans saying they were optimistic. The only segment of Americans who are less optimistic about Trump's second term than they were about his first are the Democrats, with just 10% saying they look forward to the next 4 years. No surprise there. It should come as, and quoting from the poll, it should come as no surprise that there is a stark partisan divide on the Trump agenda. The real question is how these policies will affect American families, especially among those who voted for Trump in 2024. Patrick Murray, director of the independent Monmouth University Polling Institute. The poll also found that Trump's least popular policy is his tariff agenda, with 47% of respondents saying they expect tariffs will hurt their family, and just 23% say they expected it to help. One of Trump's most popular policies is his plan to eliminate income tax for certain wages, with 48% of respondents saying the plan would help their family compared to just 15% that say it would hurt. Now, the poll was conducted between December 5th and December 10th, and it surveyed 1,006 U.S. adults via phone interviews and other online surveys. The poll advertises a margin of error of 3.9%. Well, of course, the majority of people are optimistic about the Trump administration because we just went through 4 years of a really crappy, worse than Jimmy Carter administration in Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and whatever committee was making the decisions. By the way, who is running the country right now? We know that it is not Joe Biden. Yesterday on the program, I played for the undercover interview or undercover video from James O'Keefe where someone at the State Department, a senior advisor, says, Biden's gone, man. He can't even put two sentences together. Well, we all knew that. So who is running the country? My guess is it's a bunch of his radical bureaucrats there at the White House. But who's to know? Now, one thing I haven't talked about is committees in the House. Now, I went to great lengths on the podcast to talk about the makeup of the committees in the Senate, and they are, without a doubt, a dumpster fire. Soon-to-be president, or supposed president of the Wyoming Senate, Bo Biteman, gave 7 of the 10 committees to the Redcoats. 7 out of 10, meaning he's only got definitely 2 that are chaired by conservatives, and then there's appropriations. But there's some questions how appropriations is going to work out. So 2 solid, 1 eh. Now, in the House, it is almost exactly the opposite, with 7 out of 10 committees chaired by a solid conservative, and only 3 that were given to the Redcoats. Now, those 3 are Judiciary, and the chairman there is Art Washut. Well, before I get there, let me explain this. It is actually representative of the makeup of the House. I'm just using ballpark numbers. It looks like conservatives are going to have around 40 seats in the legislature, in the House anyway. That leaves 22 that are not conservatives. And so that makes up the liberal Republicans and the Democrats. So roughly 1/3 of the House. So it kind of makes sense that 1/3 of the committees would be, kind of tilted to the left. Now, I would never have given chairmanships to any of those leftists, like Art Washut. Let me give you an example of why not. He's the guy that threw me out of a committee meeting that wasn't noticed to the public and that he had absolutely no right to throw the press out of. Now, I know there's some on the left that thought that was funny, but even Landon Brown, whom I talked to right after I was thrown out of that committee room, said that it's illegal to do that. It was Art Washut who demands that his committee bills be pushed onto the floor and voted on. In fact, I witnessed several times where Art Washut berated members of his committee for not voting for a committee bill, because presumably if it's a committee bill, then somehow it's good. Well, a lot of the committee bills that came out during this interim are big, giant, steaming piles of crap. So it doesn't matter how much time or how much money they spent on crap bills. They're still crap bills, and they still need to be killed on the floor. Another one is travel and recreation. That one is chaired by Andrew Byron. I cannot believe that a chairmanship was given to Andrew Byron. But on that committee, listen to this. You've got Andrew Byron as the chair. Harshman, Julie Jarvis, Pamela Thayer, Alyssa Campbell, Bob Worf, Marilyn Connolly, Liz Storr, and Ken Chestek. So that committee, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 definite redcoats, and there's 1, 2, 2 that are kind of on the fence, and then there's Bob Worf. So I mean, definitely a Democrat redcoat centered committee. Now, the way that I think I would have done it, and the way that I think that Speaker Chip Nyman should have done it, is weighted the committees how they should be. That is, instead of freezing out the redcoats out of all committees like Albert Sommers did, on many committees there was 1 conservative or maybe 2, but they were all weighted really heavily towards the redcoats. Give them the proper representation, but still maintain control of the committees, because, after all, it is conservatives that are in control of the House. Nonetheless, though, Speaker Nyman gave 3 of the committees to the redcoats. The other one, and this one really fries me, but is the Transportation Committee, and it's chaired by none other than Landon Brown. And I haven't checked for a while, but it's been something like 1,400 days since Landon Brown agreed to an interview on Cowboy State Politics and then didn't show up. That was January 20th of 2021. Is when he agreed to do that interview and then didn't show up. But on that Transportation Committee, you've got Landon Brown, Bob Nicholas, Lloyd Larson, Cody Wiley, Rob Geringer, and Ivan Posey. So there's 6 redcoats on there. And then the conservatives are guys that we think that were going to be conservative. Dalton Banks, Dalton, he votes with the conservatives most of the time. Reuben Tarver, yep, he's pretty conservative. And Darren McCann. I really like Darren McCann. So that committee is totally made up of redcoats too. So there you have 3 out of 10 that are controlled by the redcoats. Now compare that to the Senate, where 7 out of 10 committees are controlled by the redcoats. Now, keep in mind, though, you've got Chip Nyman as the Speaker of the House, and you have Bo Beitman as the President of the Senate. 2 pretty conservative people. I really like both of them, although, I mean, their voting records anyway, although it was Bo Beitman that gave away 7 of the committees and only kept 3. And on the other side of the coin, Speaker Nyman gave 3 committees to the redcoats and kept 7. So the House really is the exact opposite of what was done in the Senate. So you're still going to see a lot of conservative legislation come out of the House of Representatives, and it's going to go over to the Senate, and God knows what's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of conservative bills that die in committee in the Senate. Now, I've heard several rumors that, well, we've got 3 committees. We could run the bills that we want through those committees. Well, quite frankly, there's just not enough people. There's not enough space. There's not enough time to run all of the conservative legislation that's going to come out of the House through those 3 committees. It's just not going to work. So anyway, the long and the short of the committee makeup in the House is it is the exact opposite of what happened in the Senate. And there is a good argument to be made that the makeup of the committees in the House is representative of the House membership as a whole. The redcoats and the Democrats account to about roughly a third of the membership of the House, and they have 3 of the committees. Seems like a pretty fair makeup, though I would have done it entirely different. I don't think that you put somebody like Landon Brown in charge of a committee or put him anywhere near any sort of money. That guy has spent way more money since Cowboy State Politics has been around than I can possibly come up with. Now, let me add on top one more thing about soon-to-be Chairman Landon Brown. This is the guy that spoke on behalf of a now convicted rapist. He went into court and spoke on the guy's behalf. And conservatives went nuts over that. So why we would give him a chairmanship, I have no idea. I don't think the guy deserves to have a chairmanship. And and Landon, you're welcome to come on the program anytime that you want. I would love to have a conversation with you. In fact, Landon Brown is one of the people that I have sent probably more invites to come on Cowboy State Politics than any of them. And, I've even wrote him emails saying, hey, Landon, I actually think you're right on this topic. You want to come on the show and talk about it. But since then, he's never responded. Maybe I'll get an interview with him this go around. But anyway, there is your makeup of the House of Representatives. And, it's I'm really looking forward to this session. There's going to be some good stuff come out of the House. I don't know about the Senate. That place looks like a dumpster fire. More after the break. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by FreedomGoldUSA.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to freedomgoldusa.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if gold or silver is right for you. One more time, that's freedomgoldusa.com/David. Cowboy State Politics, and I am David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone. Doing what I was born to do each and every day with talent given to me by God himself. Pocahontas has popped her head back up, and she has sent a letter to President-elect Trump demanding answers over Elon Musk's conflict of interest. And the response from the Trump administration is epic. And, normally I wouldn't pay any attention to anything that Elizabeth Warren has to say. But in this case, it is definitely worth a laugh. And I quote, Senator Elizabeth Warren is pursuing answers from the president-elect Donald Trump on what ethical standards billionaire Elon Musk is being held to during the transition process. In a letter to Trump, Warren said Musk needs to, quote, resolve his conflicts of interest if he wishes to continue serving as a top advisor to you and your transition team. Now, of course, Elon Musk is a highly successful businessman. He is probably the richest man in the history of the world, known for such ventures as Tesla, SpaceX, and of course, X. Additionally, he is co-leading a newly proposed advisory board tasked with eliminating government waste when Trump takes office. Mr. Musk's substantial private interests prevent, and this is Elizabeth Warren again, Pocahontas herself, present a massive conflict of interest with the role he has taken on as your unofficial co-president, Warren wrote, pointing out that some of his companies have government contracts to receive indirect government support. Here is the beautiful part about this. In a statement responding to Warren, Trump's transition team spokesperson, Carolyn Levitt, told Fox News Digital, and listen to this, quote, President Trump has assembled the most impressive and qualified team of innovators, entrepreneurs, and geniuses to advise and staff our government. Pocahontas can play any political games and send toothless letters, but the Trump-Vance transition team will continue to be held to the highest ethical and legal standards possible, a standard unfamiliar to a career politician whose societal impact is 1/1024th of Elon Musk's. In Warren's letter, the senator added, as a member of the transition team, enough of Elizabeth Warren, 1/1024th of the societal impact that Elon Musk has had. Of course, if you remember right, Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, who spent a career claiming that she was Native American, actually did a DNA test, and it turned out that she has 1/1024th part Native American, which means that the Cowboy state politics studio dogs have as much Native American in them as Pocahontas. Absolutely incredible. Now, the left is continuing to try to find ways to denigrate the incoming Trump administration. And they're having to be pretty innovative because, as I started out the program with a poll showing that 53% of Americans are actually pretty optimistic of the next 4 years. The left and different media outlets, this one's coming from the Washington Post, are engaging in surveys and trying to figure out where Americans are on the Trump administration. And this new and innovative way is America's best decade. And they surveyed a whole bunch of people. And here's the result that they came up with. And let's see here. Here it is. The plucky poll slingers at YouGov, that's who conducted this poll, who are consistently willing to use their elite tier survey skills in service of measuring the unmeasurable, asked 2,000 adults which decade had the best and worst music, movies, economy, and so forth across 20 different categories. But when we charted them, no consistent pattern emerged. Nobody can agree on which decade was the worst. Now, they did hit some peaks. When asked which decade had the most moral society, respondents said the 1950s. The difference probably depends on whether you remember the particular decade of Leave It to Beaver, drive-in theaters, and 12 Angry Men, or the Red Scare, the murder of Emmett Till, or massive resistance to school integration. Quote, this was a time when Republicans were pretty much running the show and had reason to be happy, pioneering nostalgia researcher Morris Halbrook told us in an email. Apparently, you could argue that nostalgia is colored by political preferences. Surprise, surprise. And he's right. But any political, racial, or gender divides were dwarfed by what happened when we charted the data by generation, age, and more than anything. So we looked at the data another way, but the result of the poll is that there is no consensus on any of it. Now, what you might expect, though, is... and here, let me just read it to you. YouGov didn't just ask about the best music and the best economy. The pollsters were asked about the worst music and the worst economy. But almost without exception, if you ask an American when times were the worst, the most common response will be right now. The truth that holds true when the now is clearly not the right answer. So even the people that run the poll are trying to correct the results of the poll. I mean, they're trying to jerry-rig it in any way, shape, or form. And the truth is they just want to get away from the optimism that Donald Trump has instilled in Americans. And I think it's a great time to be alive. I have to tell you that I haven't been this optimistic in a really long time. And that goes for just about everybody that I know. Now, I do occasionally run into those Democrats who think the world is coming to an end. There's one person in Sheridan I know that swore up and down that she was moving out of the country if Trump won. Interestingly enough, she's still around and making appointments. So I don't think she really has any plans on going anywhere anyway. Well, before I move on, let's go ahead and open up the phone lines. And if you want to be part of the program, it's the number in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989 if you want to be part of the program. If there's something on your mind, go ahead and give me a call, and maybe we'll talk about it. So there's a couple of stories that I didn't. Well, you know what? Let's go here since I have some audio of this one. If you're familiar with Stephen A. Smith, he's a popular sports broadcaster. He's done some things with Sean Hannity, but he found out that a lot of the January 6th things that he was told were absolute lies from the Democrat Party. And now he's furious. This comes to me from The Blaze, and I quote, "Despite desperate attempts by the Democrats to disguise what really happened on January 6th, the truth is finally coming out." There's the Loudermilk report that came out, I believe it was yesterday or the day before. And that one pretty much says that the Democrats lied about January 6th. Liz Cheney was tampering with witnesses, and it was the Pentagon who was largely responsible for January 6th. That they didn't send National Guard troops when they were supposed to. They were ordered to do it, and they just delayed that order and pretty much allowed it to happen. And so anyway, Stephen A. Smith, he's pretty mad about it, and he went to his podcast to talk about it. Let's see here. Why don't I just play it for you? It's some pretty interesting audio. Now, Stephen A. Smith, solid Democrat, was a supporter of Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden did a long interview with Sean Hannity where he absolutely said that Kamala is going to win the election. He's totally in support of him, and for the reasons. And he, if I remember correctly, in that interview, he included January 6th as one of the reasons. So listen to what he says now.
Didn't hear anything about that for the election. Didn't hear anything about that when the quote-unquote insurrection was broached by Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. The belief that Donald Trump was a danger to democracy and using this as a profound, illuminating bullet point to make that case. And now here we are yet again finding even more evidence to Donald Trump's claims when he articulated that the process is rigged. My big issue is that I'm really sick and tired of every time I turn around finding something else that the Democrats have lied about or downplayed or misrepresented along the way. I mean, I see Republicans like Megyn Kelly or Officer Tatum or Candace Owens or, the Sean Hannitys of the world. You know what I'm getting tired of? To the Democratic Party. You know what I'm getting really pissed off about? I'm getting really ticked off at every time they open their mouth about something pertaining to y'all, they seem right to make the case that the right had a monopoly on insidious, evil tendencies, corrupt tendencies, duplicitous, hypocritical, untruthful tendencies. And every time they made those accusations, we turn around and find out that at least some of them are guilty of the same. I don't know about y'all, but I'm sick of all of it. I'm sick of all of it.
Exactly right. A Democrat who has come to the realization that the Democrats are lying to you. They have been for a really long time, and it's the same thing that I started out the show with, that Democrat ideas don't work in the real world. I mean, if you want to destroy the country and put us at grave risk from all of our enemies and absolutely deplete our military, well, then their ideas work just fine. But as far as creating prosperity and moving this country to a higher stature, to increasing energy independence, to doing any of those things, Democrat ideas never work. It's why I say all the time that we're right, they're wrong. I mean, that's the end of it. And when you try to entertain Democrat ideas of more spending and more government programs and depleting the military and being nicer and all of this diversity, equity, and inclusion crap, and indoctrinating little kids in school to believe the leftist lies that you're telling them, none of those things really work in the real world. It's why when a successful Republican runs for election, he gets elected in a landslide. And if you look at the successful Republicans, Donald Trump, George W. Bush, now I've got a lot of problems with George W. Bush, but he did some good things. Ronald Reagan, I mean, all of the big names. The reason why they were so popular and Trump is so popular is their ideas work. Conservative ideas always work. And as far as the Democrats go, well, they're wrong. And the only place that their ideas work is absolutely in some sort of utopia. Now, I know that a lot of you like Speaker of the House Johnson. Say he's a conservative, and for a long time, he was a conservative attorney, defended a lot of pro-life individuals, and did a lot of good things. And I for about 5 minutes was hopeful that Mike Johnson was going to do a good job as the U.S. Speaker of the House. But he's since proved that he is really not all that different from Mitch McConnell and the Washington swamp. From the Hill, House Republicans fume at Speaker Johnson over the handling of the continuing resolution. We apparently can't pass a budget. Nope. We just have to continue passing continuing resolutions. And if you go back to the last time I interviewed Representative Hageman, I asked her, okay, do you have your spending bills in order? And her answer was a flat no. Nope, we haven't passed any of them, and it doesn't look like we're going to. Instead, we've been operating on a continuing resolution. From the Hill, and I quote, House Republicans are fuming at Speaker Mike Johnson's handling of an end-of-year measure to extend government funding until March, saying it is more like a sprawling omnibus, which they abhor, than a simple temporary funding measure. The continuing resolution that we're talking about here, which will keep government funding at current levels through March 14th, is also set to include $100.4 billion in disaster aid to those affected by the hurricanes earlier this year and $10 billion in economic assistance to farmers, lawmakers say. It's not a continuing resolution, which is a continuation of the budget. It's turning into an omnibus, Marjorie Taylor Greene said. The final text of the measure has not yet been released, but it looks like our stereotypic 1,400-page document. It's a total dumpster fire. I think it's garbage, Representative Eric Burleson of Missouri, a member of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, said. This is what Washington, D.C. has done. This is why I ran for Congress, to try to stop this. And sadly, it's happening again. We get this negotiated crap, and we're forced to eat this crap sandwich, said Chip Roy. Why? Because freaking Christmas is right around the corner, and it's the same dang thing every year. Legislate by crisis, legislate by calendar, not legislate because it's the right thing to do. Johnson received an earful of criticism during a closed-door House GOP conference meeting Tuesday when he briefed members on the emerging details of the funding package. The gripes are not just coming from hardline conservatives. Mike Lawler, who represents a district won by President Biden in 2020 and Vice President Harris last month, stood up during the GOP conference meeting and told Johnson the government funding process has not been member-driven, according to a source in the room. Lawler also aired grievances about Democrats playing a key role in the funding process, telling Johnson at one point, "I'm not an effing Democrat." So Speaker Mike Johnson, not exactly the most conservative guy in the room, and he hasn't been legislating as one, and he hasn't been leading like one. It's been continuing resolution after continuing resolution with apparently no end in sight. And it is the swamp doing the swamp thing all over again. And it's, I don't know how we stop it except to elect more conservatives to the House of Representatives. Man, if we could clone Harriet Hageman about 20 times, 40 times, and send them to different states, maybe then we'd get something figured out. But right now, it's Mike Johnson and his continuing resolutions and the complete dumpster fire that they are. We'll finish up the program in just a second. I don't know if you've noticed this or not. Jingle bells, jingle bells. That's right, my friends. It's Christmas time. And if you haven't done so already, you are going to need a Christmas tree, which means you're going to have to tromp through about 2 feet of snow to find it. And you definitely want to make sure that you keep your feet nice and toasty warm. The best way that you can do that is to order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the warmest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Watch out! Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. The program is only going to continue to expand to every platform I can think of. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, a whole bunch more. Welcome back to Cowboy State Politics on the Independence Network. Now, I realize you haven't heard that much about the network here lately. Right now, we're just kind of treading water. We're working on a couple of things in the background. So thank you for listening to the show wherever you're listening to it from. Like I mentioned, there's a number of platforms that you can listen to it. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, and on the Independence Network. So all you got to do is go to the website, independencenetwork.us, and you can find the players right there on the top of the page. So I cannot wait for President Trump to take the oath of office, and for a lot of reasons, one of which is Doge. We might even have to have a Doge segment on the program. And this is one of the things about the holiday, and I know I'm strange, and you don't want to be in my head because the weirdest things come up. But one of the things I enjoy about this time of year is the Festivus report. That's the report of all the government waste that's put out by Rand Paul every year, and he lists all of the ridiculous things that our politicians spend yours and my money on. And now one of those that has been a complete boondoggle is high-speed rail. Now, we always hear about Democrats talking about high-speed rail, specifically Joe Biden. That's one of his things, man. If it has rails and it kind of resembles a train, that guy is all about it. But it would appear that Doge has set its sights on high-speed rail. And I quote, Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have begun identifying specific government programs that their Department of Government Efficiency would target in the next presidential administration, including California's high-speed rail project. In 2008, and this thing is, you talk about government waste, this is got to be the perfect example of it. But anyway, in 2008, California voters approved a plan to connect Los Angeles and Sacramento via electrified high-speed rail by 2030. Since then, the project's timeline has been repeatedly extended and its budget increased. As with other large infrastructure projects contingent upon federal funding, California high-speed rail has been delayed by cronyism, political horse trading, and regulatory inefficiencies. Parts of Southern California still haven't completed the necessary environmental reviews to lay the track. What was originally expected to cost $33 billion, 75% of which would be paid by the federal government or private funders, has ballooned to $128 billion. In March, the then CEO of the California High-Speed Rail Authority told lawmakers that the project would need roughly $100 billion more to be completed. The project is funded primarily by federal grants and California's cap-and-trade program. Since 2009, it has received nearly $6.8 billion from the federal government. Revenue from the state's cap-and-trade program has generated another $6.4 billion for the project as of November of last year. Despite 16 years and billions of dollars, high-speed rail in the Golden State has yet to transport a single passenger. With population declines in the state after the pandemic, expected ridership has fallen from 41 million people, that was a 2009 projection, to 28.4 million people. That's the 2024 projection. Nevertheless, funding for the project continues. The rail authority is currently constructing a 119-mile segment track in the Central Valley, which it hopes to extend to 171 miles and be complete between 2030 and 2033. The full 494-mile system was originally expected to be operational by then. Hundreds of billions of dollars being flushed down the drain, and with no results to show whatsoever. It is a perfect example of what government and Democrats do when they have a big pile of money. Spend it on ridiculous projects where a lot of money goes to their political cronies. Great example is the whole electric charging station thing that we funneled billions of dollars into. And and if memory serves, like 4 were built at a cost of billions of dollars apiece. Or the electric mail trucks, which are extraordinarily behind schedule. You see, all of these green energy dreams are nothing more than cronyism. They have been from the very beginning. Need I remind you of Solyndra during the Biden administration, where they were given a gigantic TARP loan and then immediately went out of business? Where did all of that money go to? Well, it went to all their political allies and their cronies. That's exactly what happens with all of these green projects. And this high-speed rail, it's no different. And by the way, did you see Gavin Newsom claiming that California has been doing Doge since before Doge existed, that they're an efficient government? Absolutely incredible. Gavin Newsom is the perfect example of what Democrats do every single time they get around a microphone. Remember, their ideas don't work in the real world, and so they have to lie to you. And so Gavin Newsom gets up and he tells the people of California, oh, no, man, we've been doing government efficiency for a really long time. Pay no attention to the high-speed rail. Pay no attention to the largest unfunded pension liability in the entire country. Don't worry about any of that. We're still doing government efficiency. Absolutely, incredibly bizarre, my friends. But, if we had an honest press, which, by the way, I've been really impressed by the number of people that are taking it upon themselves to hold politicians accountable. I mean, every once in a while you see different podcasts pop up on social media, and I think it's absolutely great. The more voices, the better, and it allows us to have a political discourse that we didn't have before. I mean, the only thing that we had before was the cow pie and the Pravda on the Platte, and neither of them have a conservative bone in their body. I cannot wait to see the articles that Trotsky Wolfson is going to write about this year's legislative session. I mean, he's a leftist anyway, even though he's a registered Republican. That was a funny episode. I'll have to dig that one up, where I figured out that Trotsky is actually a crossover voter. But even though he's a registered Republican, he sure as heck doesn't write like it. And if you look at the cow pie as a whole, if you are a redcoat or if you are a Democrat, you get almost 100% positive coverage. If you are a conservative, there's a 100% chance that you'll be covered negatively. And even pieces that demonstrably are positive towards a conservative or an actual Republican, they still find a way to put their little digs in there to try to minimize the message, try to make it less important, like it's not going to work. That's what the media does. And the Wyoming media should take a lesson from the national media, that their power to influence voters really is waning. If you look back at the election, I can tell you how many pieces went after conservatives, and still we won right around 40 seats in the House of Representatives. And we took out a couple, at least one person in the Senate. Chi-Com Som Albert Sommers was taken out by a conservative. A good friend of the program, now Senator Laura Pearson, or soon to be Senator Laura Pearson. So the Wyoming media should take a page or take some notes from what's happening in the national media, and maybe get some conservatives on their staff to cover things fairly. But I don't expect that to happen. And it's more representative of the Wyoming press. I mean, most of them are Democrats anyway. All you got to do is look at the Pravda on the Platte to figure that out. Well, we've pretty much burned up another busy broadcast hour on the program. Just to give you kind of a roadmap of where we're going, make sure that you don't miss next Monday's Cowboy State Politics podcast. Is going to be our yearly Christmas special. And then, of course, on Christmas Eve, our traditional Christmas story. So we're getting close to the big fat guy coming down the chimney, and I cannot wait for it. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.